this computer. Okay. So good morning, everybody. And if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask in the course of things, I will periodically unmute everybody, but feel free to use the chat function at the bottom of the screen to send any questions that you have or any comments, and I'll respond to that right away. Alan, thank you for your good morning. Let me first of all answer the question about why do we have a password all of a sudden. Of course, so much of the world has moved to Zoom, and Zoom was originally a rather niche operation compared to WebEx and some of the larger, more corporate ways of speaking. And one of the things people have realized about Zoom is that it does not have a lot of security. So people were able to easily break into Zoom conferences and start disrupting them. So one of the things that just happened apparently overnight was that in response to that critique, Zoom has now required that you set up passwords for any meeting. So B'nai Tikva has now chosen one password, a numeric password, which you obviously all got this morning. And that numeric password will now be used for all of our Zoom meetings. I'm sorry that there's another layer of complexity, but this is going to add security to what we are doing. So that's okay. So that's what this was about. So I want to welcome everybody to our Zoom conference on having a Seder during the time of the coronavirus. One of the terms that's out there for Seders this year is a Seder of separation. This is a year when we're not going to be all together, not for our second Seder, and that was going to be communal, or for our individual Seders. Most of us are in much smaller groups than we are accustomed to. So how does one do a Seder virtually? How does one connect, and what are some of the principles for running a Seder during a time when we don't have all the resources that we normally have? I'm going to share some text with you also, so if some of you have a pen and paper with you, or you might want to get a pen and paper, you can write down some of the URLs and some of the other information that I'll be sharing, but I will also post both this session and the outline of the session that I'm talking from on our website later, hopefully later today. So you'll be able to, whatever information I share will be available to you. The larger message of this year's Passover Seder is to be generous with ourselves and with others. We recognize that the Seder might not have all of the structure, completeness, rituals, and so on that a Seder normally has, but the basic message is prepare and be gentle with yourself. Whatever happens, this is a Seder that we're all going to remember for the rest of our lives. This is just that kind of year. So remember that whatever you do, for those of us who are going to be leading Seders, is going to be deeply appreciated. I want to start with what are some of the resources that you have beyond this phone call for getting what you need to put together a virtual Seder. And I want to mention 4 resources. One of them is our Passover resource page at the B'nai Tikva website. That has Haggadot to download, including a very pretty, colorful, straightforward Haggadah from Valley Beth Shalom congregation. And it also has musical selections from Cantor Grossman of highlights of the Seder, as well as it'll have everything we're sharing today. We also sent out last week a link to a spreadsheet which is constantly growing of all of the online Passover Seders that people can join at conservative movement synagogues all around the world. So if you're just cognizant of changes in time zone, if you wanted to sit in on a congregational Seder, whether it's one directed towards children, one directed towards adults, a 1-hour Seder, a longer Seder, All of those options are spelled out on that page, and we will get the URL for that put up on our website as well. Third, there is a website called Haggadah. Haggadahs Are Us. So the word Haggadahs, then the letter R, then the letter US.com. On haggadahs.rus.com, you can download Noam Sion's Haggadahs. These are really wonderful Haggadot, and they are available for free download from that site. But more importantly, right away when you look at that site is a Corona Seder planner, that he put together. And hold on, okay. So you can download that planner, and that has everything you'll need for running different parts of the Seder. Lots of great suggestions. I've tried to assimilate some of the best of that in what I'm putting out right now. And the final website I want to mention to you is ritualwell.org, ritualwell.org. And if you're looking for a Miriam's Cup ritual, for some new rituals, rituals that are related to this year, all of that can be found on Ritual Well. And by the way, I just want to mention, this is something all of you should be aware of. It's the website that if you're ever doing a baby naming, if you ever want to do a Shabbat dinner, if you ever want any sort of ritual activity in Judaism, you can go there and get the latest and most interesting variety of rituals at Ritual Well. So it is a website that was originally started particularly for feminist rituals. It has broadened itself very widely since then. And just for, in the name of transparency, the founder and original editor of ritualwell.org was Lori, who some of you heard just a few days ago. This was something that Lori created when she was the head of Women's and Gender Studies at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. It's become something really special. So haggadahsarus.com, ritualwell.org will give you a tremendous amount of material to play with. I want to now talk a little bit about setup suggestions for a Zoom Seder. Often, many of us like to have a variety of Haggadot at our Seder. When you are doing a Seder with people remotely, it is best to be able to have everybody on the same Haggadah. We have put up on our website the Rabbinical Assembly Haggadah Feast of Freedom, which is a good base text that you can work from if you'd like to, so everyone can be on the same page. And some of you are aware of the capacity to screen share. And when you have the Feast of Freedom Haggadah as a PDF, you can actually put that on your screen and share that. There are, of course, many other Haggadot, and Haggadot.com has a website where you can actually customize a family-friendly Haggadah that in exactly the way you want it. So play around, find what you'd like, go on Google, search for family-friendly online Haggadah, and you'll be able to get to a lot of things, and then just share it with everybody in advance. And of course, since Zoom is getting a little bit more complicated, if you're going to do a Zoom Seder, one of the things that we're planning to do is to get everybody to log on today or Monday to just make sure everybody can get on and understands how to use the microphone and so on. So do a practice run if you can before the Seder itself. Of course, it's always a good idea to choose a leader for the Seder and to contact people in advance and give them their roles or tell them what the topics are going to be for discussion. And we'll go over a lot of those potential topics in another moment. The Passover Seder and a Zoom Seder does not need to take place around the dining room table. I don't know about your home, but in my home, The dining room table chairs are padded, but they are not the most comfortable chairs in the house. What we have come to do in recent years until the meal is until the section where you do charoset and maror, just before the meal and the second cup of wine, we do the discussion part of the Seder and the karpas, the hors d'oeuvres, sitting around the living room on couches. And again, that might be something you would consider, that you can begin the Seder sitting in comfortable chairs and advise other people to do that as well. So in that way, everybody will be a little less antsy and can sit comfortably, for that first part of the Seder where you're really going to want to be interactive. Also, for some of us, when we break for the meal, that might be the end of everybody being together for the Seder. People might not want to come back together after that part of things. So I just want to suggest that some of the elements of the Seder that are after the meal, things like the cup of Elijah and the Miriam's cup, things like singing Hadgadya or Echad Mi Odea, can be moved to the front. And you could do those as part of the first hour of the Seder rather than delaying them for the end, especially if you feel that a lot of the children or a lot of the people who are on with you might not be able to or comfortable sticking with you for the whole evening. So while the name of the Passover Seder is Seder, which means order, this is a year when we can be a little more playful with the order. And I just want to grant everybody that permission to get in some of the favorite pieces a little bit earlier. As some of you have noticed, singing on Zoom does not work. We've tried this in our weeknight services. Zoom is designed to not let people talk over one another. It's designed to separate voices. And that can be very frustrating if you want communal singing. So my recommendation is that you give everybody who's online with you an opportunity to lead part of the Seder, but whenever somebody is leading the singing, to mute everybody else and encourage people to sing in their spaces. So if you're looking at each other, you can see your mouths, you can see the spirit of the singing. But if you do singing in unison, I just want to warn you, you'll be a little frustrated at the sound because it will not be synchronous. It'll be a cacophony of voices. So you might want to, again, choose your singers for different parts of it. And again, as much as possible, do a playlist. Write out, here's what we're going to do, here's the pages that it's on, here's the person who's going to be leading it. And that little bit of preparation can help things go a bit more smoothly. One of the best parts of the Seder this year is going to be the 4 questions, because there's just no way to hear the statement, how is this night different from all other nights, without laughing hysterically this year, because my God, is this night different from all other nights. So one of the things that you might do is really open up the 4 questions. And by the way, for many of our Seders, I think in my family, someone in their mid-20s will be the youngest. For others, somebody in their 60s or 70s might be the youngest. Hold on to that tradition of the youngest leading at least the traditional 4 questions, but add more questions. Remember, the whole point of the Seder is asking questions. So this is a chance to say to everybody, what other questions would you ask about how tonight is different from all other nights? When we do hand washing, some of you might have seen that, the new order of the Seder, Kadesh Orchatz, Karpas Orchatz, that just the washing is just constant to reflect on how we're washing all the time. And also to create, as we'll mention, a coronavirus Seder plate. So what would you put on a coronavirus Seder plate? A roll of toilet paper, a measuring stick to measure distances, some Purell and wipes. Whatever the plagues of this virus have been, you can put some of those on your Seder plate to sort of indicate something new, something people can talk about. And again, it's an opportunity to also say, have there been any blessings of what's gone on the last few weeks? And it's an opportunity to sort of balance all of that, to talk a little bit about what has been so hard, but also to think a little bit about what this sort of enforced homecoming has been about. Next thing for preparation for the Seder. Tell everybody in advance what they should have for the opening hour or so of the Seder. So make sure that everyone joining you on the call has wine and grape juice, has matzah, and for karpas, I would imagine for many of us in the past, karpas has been a sprig of parsley. In my family, it was always boiled potato. This would be a very good year to tell everybody, you know something, let's have real hors d'oeuvres this year as part of karpas. So some of the traditions that are really nice for those of you who are better cooks about this, one of the great Italian Jewish traditions for appetizers is, of course, to make fried artichokes, to have potato chips, to have little knishes, to have hard-boiled eggs in salt water, to serve the gefilte fish then. In other words, there's nothing wrong with making the karpas course a real hors d'oeuvres course this year. And in that way, people can munch a little bit while the Seder conversation is going on. And of course, crudité, right? Of course, carrots and celery and other things like that, so that all of that is served. And while we're serving that, another thing, it's okay to be a little bit more generous with the drinking of wine this year, so that people can have a little, refill their first cup after Kiddush. One of my colleagues, who's an Orthodox woman rabbi, put out a beautiful tweet last night. She said, yes, this is for Saturday night, yes, drinking scotch counts as cleaning your house for Passover. So get rid of your scotch and have all of your kosher for Passover wine open and out on the table. And finally, going back to the issue of the order of the Seder, do the Miriam's cup early in the Seder. The Miriam's cup is a ritual where perhaps you have a cup and everyone has a water glass and everyone adds a little bit of water from their glass into the cup. And as they are adding that water, people can mention the names of people who are ill, people they are worried about or concerned about who are not on the call with you. So it's an opportunity to go around the table, think about issues of health and healing, and do a prayer for wellness hooked into the memory of Mother Miriam, whose well brought healing and sustenance to the children of Israel when they were in the wilderness. I'm going to just take a moment to share screen. Ellie, can you see the screen? I just want to make sure, just nod if you can see the text there. Yes?
Yes, I can see the screen.
Perfect. Okay. So there are the two URLs I mentioned, Haggadahs Are Us and Ritual Well. And all of this will eventually be on our website. And here's what we just talked about. Use one Haggadah, hand out rolls in advance, be in a comfortable place, move some of the favorites from the end of the Seder earlier, do a practice run and mute people who are not speaking, expand on the 4 questions, a list of what to have. And I offer, do a simpler charoset this year. The essence is apples, walnuts, wine, and honey or cinnamon. And horseradish can be fine if you weren't able to get yourself a horseradish root this year. The Corona Seder plate and the Miriam's Cup healing ritual. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And if anybody would like to unmute themselves and share something along, in terms of preparation, or anything anybody would like to share about ideas you've had or other things you've seen. And then we're going to talk about conversation triggers. What are some of the things that can add heft and meaning to the Seder? So before we turn to that, anybody want to add anything about thoughts you've had for the Seder? Nancy, please.
I was thinking of the song Dayenu. And when I was awake at 3 a.m, probably could have talked to a lot of you at that time. I was thinking of the song Dayenu and thinking that maybe it might be kind of fun and also meaningful if we each added our own new Dayenu, like, having technology to connect us or being able to walk outside and breathe the fresh air. All of these are Dayenu.
It's wonderful. And again, that's something you could put out to, if you're on a Seder with friends or family, put that out in an email in advance and say, could everybody please think of one Dayenu so that we can go around and everybody could add that. That's wonderful. Yes, Mona.
How about like for the bone, the shank bone that you have to have, or the lamb's bone? What would you recommend to put in its place if you don't have it?
Okay, so for a chicken neck, if you do have some of that, and the vegetarian version of the shank bone has been beets. So I don't know if people are doing any veggie shopping, but because beets are red, so they capture a little bit of that, but that's been the traditional vegetarian option. So, a chicken neck or a chicken wing would be fine roasted. Oh, and Linda's adding a sweet potato and call it the Paschal yam. That is very cute. So, yes, you can have a Paschal yam as well. Okay. Anything else, anyone? I don't see everybody at once. There are about 55 screens right now. So if anybody wants to add, just shout out if anyone has another thought to add.
It's Karen. I was going to mention that the 30-minute Seder, which was used a long time ago, which we still use sometimes, does the order, and it's all pre the meal. So if you're looking for the key highlights and what might be highlighted in a Seder that would take place and not come back, there's a good outline of that on the 30-minute Seder.
Where is that? Where is that?
I have copies of it, but I'm assuming you can get it online. I will see if I can find a resource for it, but I know I have copies of it that I could probably scan and send out.
That's great. If anybody wants to take a moment to just Google that and see if the 30-minute Seder is online, you can put the URL into chat for everyone so everyone can see it. Thanks, Karen.
Sure.
Oh, and there's a picture of it. Okay. Wonderful.
Okay. Agata.
I'm sorry?
Oh, 30-minute Seder.
Okay, I'm going to remute everybody, and we're going to go now to triggers for conversation during the Seder. So I'm actually going to screen share so you can see the triggers as I'm going through this. Okay. So here's some things that you can put out in advance or that you as a leader can put out during the Seder. Describe one positive memory of the last few weeks. With limits on motion, with limits on how far we can go, what has opened up for you? So that's a topic. There might not be a lot in this box, but I'm sure you'll come up with interesting things. I know my dog has been very, very happy about getting 3 and 4 walks a day and never being by herself, but that's from a dog's perspective. Ask at the beginning or in advance, what's your favorite part of the Seder? And that's something to just check in with people about, just to make sure that if there are people on your Seder who do have something that they really count on, a song, you're not going to be able to help them if their answer is brisket, but if their answer is something from the Seder, so make sure that some of the favorites are included. Bring an object, a symbol of freedom, a symbol of the current situation, a photo that speaks to oppression or liberation in your family, a favorite ritual item, or something that has brought you joy these past weeks. I know in our family, there's been a renewal of a competition between me, Lori, and our daughter, Sam, about who plays backgammon better. So, what are some of the things that have brought you joy? A book you've read, something that has sort of helped get you through these first weeks of being separated from each other. So again, asking people as part of their preparation for the Seder to bring something and share that on camera. When you do the candle lighting, there's always a moment for the blessing of the children. And I just want to say that it could be an opportunity at the beginning of the Seder to go around and let everybody say something warm and meaningful about gratitude for something that the others who are on the call or other members of the immediate family have done. So it's an opportunity just for a moment of gratitude, again, to just deepen the sense of the circle and mutual appreciation. Yachatz, the breaking of the middle matzah. There is the concept of brokenness and wholeness in our tradition, that things that are broken are not thrown away. What is the best example of that, of course, is the broken tablets when Moses smashed the tablets, and those broken tablets were what was kept in the temple in the Holy of Holies. So Judaism teaches that just because something is broken does not mean that it cannot be once again made whole. And when you think about Yachatz, at the beginning of the Seder, we break it, and at the end of the Seder, we find the Afikomen, and we eat that together and bring it back together again. And there is this Hasidic teaching, there is nothing more whole than a broken heart. So it's an opportunity to think about how even in times of stress, even in times of anxiety, we're not rejecting this, we're not saying that, we're not running from it. We're trying to ask ourselves how to live in this moment in a way that's purposeful and meaningful and where we can still appreciate blessing. During Halach Ma'anya, that opening paragraph where it says, "Let all who are hungry, let them come and eat," either now in these days before the Seder or at the Seder, make a commitment to some sort of tzedakah project, maybe a tzedakah project that everybody who's part of your Zoom Seder can join in together for. So that even though we're not able to open our doors, and I know in our family, we would always have college students or others who were alone and without family join us for the Seder. This year we can't let those who need come join our Seder, but we can reach out and help. So that might be an opportunity for making that paragraph about the bread of affliction a little more meaningful. And now I want to talk about the Magid section. The centerpiece of the Haggadah is the telling of certain stories with Midrash. It's not always the most accessible. And this year in particular, the important part of Passover is to do a little learning together, to connect with the tradition. And I want to suggest 4 different ways to connect to the story of Passover in the Magid section instead of using the traditional text. One is to read chapter 1 of the book of Exodus. There's the story in there of Shifra and Puah, the Egyptian midwives. And I was thinking this year in particular that the midwives represent all the healthcare workers who, like Shifra and Puah, are putting their lives on the line to save the lives of others. Shifra and Puah risked Pharaoh's anger to save the lives of Israelite boys. And I just want to put out, this would be a chance to talk about the healthcare workers on the front lines, the other people who are doing wondrous things to save people and help people even during this difficult time. I think I have this a little bit later, but I just heard yesterday that Hertz Rent-A-Car is giving a free car rental for the next month to every doctor and nurse in New York City so that they can drive to and from work and don't have to worry about Ubers or taking public transportation, so that everybody can have their own rental car as a gift. And that's just one story of so many. Bill Gates, who I believe has a lot of money, just set up 7 factories to test 7 possible vaccines for the coronavirus, and knowing that one of them will eventually be the one that will work. And that should advance the vaccine process by months and save who knows how many lives. So what are some of the people, what are people doing? I mentioned 2 corporate examples, but also personal examples. Even in our own community, people have taken the opportunity to deliver food to others who aren't able to get, to do their own shopping and to get food for the holiday. That's, again, in the modern situation, that's something that's really putting yourself out there a little bit. So we want to appreciate that. Second, chapter 11 and 12 of the book of Exodus tells the story of the first Seder. And in that first Seder, Moses did what? Moses told the children of Israel, stay at home, there's a plague outside. Try to protect yourself from the plague by using the blood of a lamb. Stay in small groups. Gather the food you need in advance, stockpile for the emergency, and have a Seder night that is anxious, but also hopeful. In many ways, and I think this is such an interesting point to make this year, the Seders we're going to have on Wednesday or Thursday night are closer to the tone of the original Passover Seder than any Seder in between. So much of what Moses says in chapter 11 and 12, prepare in advance, stockpile what you need, do it in small groups, stay at home, don't go outside, it's dangerous out there, are all the messages we're receiving today. So you can reflect on that and read a little bit from the Haggadah. On a more upbeat note, the book for study during Passover is the Song of Songs, the beautiful love poetry of the Song of Songs. Read chapters 1 and 2. And if possible, and if you're sitting at home with one partner or you have people on your Zoom call, read it to each other. This beautiful love poetry that reminds us that outside, it's getting pretty. I see that, the first trees are blooming, the pink is coming on some of the trees, the bulbs are bursting through the ground, and the bulbs bursting through the ground are the great reminder in all religions that life follows death, that death and burial are not the end of the story, that life and renewal are part of that cycle. The egg on our Seder plate represents that round cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And that's what we see outside, and that's why we read the Song of Songs, that beautiful story of renewal and of love and of desire. And fourth, watch Prince of Egypt. Maybe as part of the Seder, watch part of it, or in advance. It's a great story for adults and for kids. It's, Steven Spielberg did it. It's very smart, very rooted in Midrash. And that's all a possibility for, again, a Maggid section that doesn't have to go on endlessly, but that can be a part of your Seder. And there are 4 ideas for doing it a little bit differently. For children, ask kids to put on a play, Saving Baby Moses, Moses and Pharaoh. They might know the songs about where, when Moses asked Pharaoh, let my people go, and Pharaoh's response was, no, 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 I will not let them go. Or the plague song with the frogs here, frogs there, frogs were jumping everywhere. And then you could ask the kids, if we had to leave suddenly to go into isolation, what would you want to bring with you? And what were the people in Egypt thinking about what they took with them? And it's a great question, especially when you reflect on, as Lori was teaching about Miriam's cup, when you reflect on the idea that the women in Egypt took tambourines with them in hope that they'd be able to use the tambourines to celebrate at the sea as they did. So what would you bring with you if you had to leave in a hurry? And it's also a chance to ask young people, what are your questions? What do you want to know about how we got to the place we're in today? What are your questions about what Passover might mean? And then finally, and this is a little bit related to the questions we mentioned before, being constrained and not having freedom. What have you learned about freedom from the last few weeks? What do you miss about freedom? And why? What do we do about the conflict between personal liberty and safety? As you know, that's such a big question in America today, where churches in some parts of the country, synagogues in some parts of the country, have continued to meet because of the desire for personal liberty and to be in groups versus the desire to flatten the curve and to help people get through this with a minimum of spread. So it's a time to reflect on that as well. Let me, hold on a second. I'm going to unmute everybody and, okay. So would anybody like to respond to any of those triggers, or are there any other triggers that you were thinking of that you'd like to add? Anything else to add there, please?
I just have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the website, because I looked at the 30-minute Haggadah, and you've got to buy it and pay for it. It's not like a download thing unless you want to pay for the download. On the one that you're going to have, do you have a brief Haggadah that you're going to post for us that we can also utilize?
I don't have a brief one. Again, what I'm trying to point out is we can all make our own brief Seder. Don't hesitate about that. But
Okay.
But the ones that we are going to have out are not compact that way. At Haggadot.com, they do have, again, I think you might need to register there. It's not completely straightforward, but you can customize your own Haggadah, and they have Haggadot. People, I'll tell you what, let me mute everyone, and then you can unmute yourself if you want to speak.
All right, thank you.
But there you can customize Haggadot for all kinds of themes, and also for children and more abridged.
Okay.
Nancy Lewis, yeah? No? Okay. Did anybody else want to add anything or any other questions? Oh, and Karen is saying that she will scan the 30-minute Seder, turn it into a PDF, and send it to us so that we can put that up on our website as well. Karen, thank you, and that's wonderful.
Rabbi
Nancy,
Gordon,
yes.
So what if you're not doing Zoom and you're alone? So do you have any I mean, hopefully I will. And then after my kids go off, and then I'm by myself the rest of the night. I mean, it's not going to be something that goes on and on like a traditional Seder. Do you recommend study, just reading through the Haggadah yourself? Do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah, I think what I just mentioned about the alternative Magids would actually be a very nice thing for somebody to do who wants to sort of deepen the evening's experience. Read those chapters, the opening chapters of the book of Exodus, because the Haggadah doesn't tell the story from Exodus, right? The Haggadah doesn't talk about Moses and Miriam. The Haggadah focuses on God and the angels and certain passages in the Bible that are not directly related to the Exodus. So this might be a year to read those chapters, to watch Prince of Egypt, or to read the Song of Songs. And the Song of Songs is really a beautiful, beautiful text. So if you have a good Bible at home, that's fine. And by the way, all of this can be found on YouTube and elsewhere where people read these texts or illustrate them or tell the stories. So that would be, I think, a nice thing would be to spend some time deepening your understanding of what Passover might mean.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Absolutely. Any other questions or thoughts on this? So those, in any case, those are some triggers for conversation. And I want to do one last piece with you this morning, which is I was going to do a full hour teaching on Easter and Passover, which I didn't get a chance to do this year. We'll do it in the future. But I know that some of you in your Seders and who you're with, there'll be both Jews and Christians there. And I want to share with you, and I'm going to do screen share one more time, a little bit about Passover and Easter to conclude our learning this morning, and then I'll say a word about something you might do in 20 more minutes. Passover and Easter emerged from the same moment. The same idea that in springtime, as we just spoke about bulbs bursting out from the ground, that the world of nature teaches us that death is not final. That the world of nature teaches us that every year we go from the trees looking as though there's nothing going on there, to the sap starting to flow again, and then to the buds emerging. The bulb is planted and it looks like nothing. The acorn is planted and it looks like nothing. The seed is there, the corn cob, the bit of a potato, and then a new crop rises out of that. So in Judaism, we tell the story of the Jewish people, that the children of Israel went down from Israel into Egypt. And remember, when you go from Israel to Egypt, you're going down. And Joseph, when he went down, kept on getting thrown in pits. It's like on the level of the individual and on the level of the Jewish people, we're always going down and being buried below. The end of the book of Genesis, the last words of the book of Genesis are, in a casket in Egypt. So there's the sense that we went down into Egypt, we were buried as a slave nation, and then we came out again. How did we come out again? Through the parted waters of the Red Sea. We were surrounded on all sides. We were sure we were going to be killed. And then at the last minute, we were able to cross through the waters of that narrow place and get to the other side. The image is of a birthing canal. The image is of a mother giving birth to a child. And the children of Israel were born again as a free people on the other side of that birth canal and began their trip to the land of Israel. So Passover is a story about springtime, about death and rebirth. And we put the blood of a lamb on the doorpost as a way to say we're going to be protected from the plague. Christianity tells the same story, but not about a nation, but about an individual. How an individual suffers and is reborn. And there is even the expression to connect Passover and Easter, have you been washed in the blood of the Lamb? So that Jesus becomes the lamb that the children of Israel used in Egypt to save them on their doorposts. So just as we plant seeds and new life comes up, just as in the Christian story, Jesus dies, comes back to life, just as in the Jewish story, the children of Israel are buried in Egypt and come back and are reborn as a new nation, all of that happens. And then the next holiday in both traditions is called Shavuot, which means the Festival of Weeks, 50 days after Passover. The next holiday in Christianity is called Pentecost, which means 50 days, Pentakosta, 50 days after Passover. And in both traditions, that next holiday is a holiday about revelation, is about, hold on one second, I just want to see, let me just look in the chat for a second. Okay. Just somebody, Deborah mentioned that she went to Haggadot.com and found it very user-friendly. So for those of you looking for short Haggadot and family-friendly Haggadot, Haggadot.com is a wonderful place to go. So the questions then that might be shared as a shared question for both Jews and Christians in this season, how do we experience renewal and rebirth in the midst of a virus? What feels new tonight? And how can we experience springtime? So maybe go outside and bring some buds in to put on your Passover table or make a little bud vase that just shows that rebirth is happening out there. And also there's a passage at the end of the Seder called "Pour Out Your Wrath on the Nations That Have Attacked the Jewish People." And you can add, and this is in Noam Sion's Haggadah, a paragraph from the Middle Ages, it goes back hundreds of years, that says, pour out your love on those people who have protected and helped the Jewish people. So that would be a time to ask everybody to share stories of those who reached out across communities to help one another. And I just list here Oregon sending ventilators to New York, people who have dress shops turning their dress shops into making masks and gowns, or the story of those corporations that have been generous to take care of those on the front line. So those are all things that you might share in the context of an interfaith experience in your Seder, or if you wanted to think together about one of the real, Passover exists on so many levels, the mystical, the historic, the agricultural. And don't miss this year, when we're a little constrained in thinking about freedom, of the opportunity to think about springtime and beauty. So let me go back to everybody. Any last questions or comments about any part of this? I hope that last piece was helpful, because first of all, whether or not you're going to be interacting with people celebrating Easter, it really does add a dimension to our appreciation of Passover to see how universal the themes of this holiday really are, and how hopeful. So any last questions or comments before I just share a word about what you might want to do today?
I have might be a tip for everyone. In our Seder, we first start with the Haggadah for the American family, which delineates certain portions of it for participants and for the leader. So everybody gets a chance to read, and we use this, or I use this, to Hallel, and then switch off to a more traditional Haggadah, which we have a few dozen of around here. So if anybody likes the Haggadah for the American family, certainly involves everyone, and it's very nice English language. So we perform the mitzvah of passing the story on.
Thank you. That's very sweet. That's very nice. Yes, Mona.
I wonder if
One of the things
Mona, wait 1 second. There's someone else who said, please.
One of the things we decided to do this year that, well, we try to do it every year, but especially this year. Last Father's Day, a very dear friend who's been celebrating Passover with us for 40 some odd years passed away. And and his daughter and her whole family contracted COVID-19. So basically, before we even begin, we're dedicating our Seder to my friend, Ifeanyi, and then the second part is to his daughter and the family for health, and then also dedicating to all the people who were there to help everybody else and who've been wonderful. So I think a dedication at the beginning is something special. I think really makes a difference to start off the quality of what you're going to be doing this for.
Thank you. That's lovely. And again, I think that theme of appreciation, memory, those who are not with us and those who are, definitely to take stock at the beginning.
I wonder if Bob would look at the other end of the Haggadah. I think there's it's all in Hebrew with no English.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, there's
one side's the Hebrew side, and the other is the English.
Okay, then you can pick out what you want to read in Hebrew.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to, Bob, I'm just going to mute everyone for one last second. I just want to mention at 12 noon today, in another 15 minutes or so, there is an international conservative movement-wide service of healing taking place with leaders, teachers, musicians from all over the Jewish world. That'll be at 12 noon. And if you want to join it, you can go to uscj.org, standing for United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, uscj.org. And you can, there on that front page, go down to the International Healing Service. Click on that, it'll take you to another page, and then you can choose to join either through YouTube or through Facebook. So that's something that you might want to do today. If people were not able to join us on this call, in a few hours, I will have the video downloaded, and we'll try to get it up on our website on the Passover resources page in case anyone else would like to join that. Lori's talk on Miriam is also located there. My friends, we continue in the next few days with our evening services. We'll have one more lunch and learn on Monday. Wednesday morning at 8 a.m., we'll do a short morning service, and then we will do the conclusion of teaching for the Fast of the Firstborn. And finally, on Thursday night at 6 p.m., we will have a short second Seder that everyone is welcome to join us for. Mark Silver, Cantor Grossman, Lori, and I will lead parts of the Seder. Cantor Grossman will do the singing, and Mark, who also has a very nice voice. And that will give you a little bit of a feel for a communal Seder before people go off to their dinners or their second Seders. I want to wish everybody safety, wellness, and a meaningful holiday experience. And I look forward to seeing many of you at our services. We'll be studying Shir HaShirim and doing Hallel Shabbat morning at 10 a.m. So please do follow and print out or download Elisa's regular emails that have the full schedule. So everyone, thank you for joining us. It's beautiful and wonderful to see so many of you here, and we will see each other again. I'm going to unmute everyone so we can wish each other a happy holiday. Hold on one second. Okay, everyone's unmuted.
Thanks, Samaya.
A happy holiday to everyone.
Thank you.
Passover, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Chag Sameach, everyone.
Happy holiday.
Goodbye.